Very specifically today, our purpose is to really talk about how do we unleash human potential in people, organizations, and communities. And specifically to do that, to be able to generate what we call breakthrough results that are far beyond what historic norms might be or predict. In essence, this conversation really gets us into how do we up-level our ability to individually and collectively transform. And this whole idea of unleashing human potential, from our opinion, is extraordinarily needed now. You know, we live in a VUCA world. VUCA being an acronym for volatility, where the forces and catalysts of change are mounting faster and faster all the time. The speed of change is way more than we've ever seen it. There's a massive amount of uncertainty. We can no longer predict linear results. It's a non-linear emergent reality that we're dealing with. The potential for surprise and new emergent dynamics are both present all the time and always occurring. The level of complexity is far beyond what it was 10, 20 years ago even. Complexity, of course, really makes it difficult to navigate because there's so many interdependencies. And we like to think of it as the signal to noise ratio, like what's really important, what's the signal and what's all the noise, and how do you navigate that complexity? And ambiguity, you know, is another really powerful attribute that we're dealing with because there's mixed meanings in this complexity. It's hard to interpret cause and effect relationships. It's hard to really get our arms around what's happening in large systems. So given the VUCA world that we live in, our challenges are bigger than they've ever been. And how do we actually solve those challenges? Whether they're global challenges like climate or politics or world peace, if you will, or local challenges in communities like feeding the homeless or fresh water, or in our organizations of navigating implementations of large, complex technology implementations. You know, the challenges are huge, and so we've got to raise our game in order to meet those challenges. So the context here that I invite you, so this is a request actually, the context that I'm holding and I'm hoping you'll all join me in is the idea of possibility thinking. So we're faced with a VUCA world. Possibility thinking means fundamentally, for a bit anyway, let's forget what we know. You know, whether our orientation is maybe as an executive and here's how I've led transformation, you know, most of my career, here's what I've learned, or maybe you're a project manager or change management specialist and you've got your method and your worldview, et cetera. Let's just put that aside for a moment. And let's suspend belief and judgment about what's possible. So let's open the door to new possibilities. And let's enter this room, if you will, this conversation with a beginner's mind, you know, where we're not bringing preconceived judgments and ideas. We're really listening for our own insight of what's possible. And so in some ways, I'm asking you to fantasize about the what ifs, you know, engage your imagination. What if this and what if that? And let's just see what outcomes that you come with or can conclude with. And so in essence, what we're stalking is what we don't yet see. You know, what are we missing? Because all of us are missing something, myself included. We can't see the whole. So what are the parts that we're missing? And fundamentally then, when we're done, let's reform our conclusions, you know, at the end of this conversation, and then let's go on from there. So that's my request, possibility thinking today. Our agenda is very straightforward. First, we're going to talk about the what. And the what is all about unleashing human potential to achieve breakthrough results, and we'll discuss that. And then we're going to look at the how. And for us, the how is developing conscious change leaders. Now, this can sound like a theoretical conversation, and it's not. Because at Being First, we've spent 40 years developing a system of transformation that actually develops the skill sets you're going to hear about in this webinar that are the essence of conscious change leadership. So everything I'm talking about has behind it a method, a practice, a training, a development, a coaching, an intervention of some sort to help build these skills, build these awarenesses, et cetera. I'm not going to go into the system of transformation. We just don't have that much time. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the whole of what conscious change leadership is all about and how it enables breakthrough results by unleashing human potential. So what do we mean by breakthrough results? Well, fundamentally, we as leaders, we have an expectation of improvement, year over year. Now, whatever we measure, it may be market share, it may be top line revenue, it may be bottom line profit, it may be innovation or product launch cycles. Whatever it is, we've got an expectation. And that expectation might be 3%, 5%, 12%, 28%. Whatever your number is, there's a bandwidth where it's a good year or not a good year around normal improvement. And what we're after in this conversation is how do we get liftoff from that? How do we get an exponential increase in results? And how do we do that at all levels of system? So individuals, as an individual contributor, and me as a leader, in my relationships with others, in the teams I'm a part of, maybe my hierarchical functional team, maybe project teams I'm on, in my organization, or maybe my part of the organization as a business unit, and in my community, if I'm a community leader. How do we actually deliver exponential breakthroughs so that we get results far beyond the improvement line? So that's the context today. We're not looking at incremental improvement. Now, fundamentally, we've got to understand what we mean by breakthrough. Well, for us, it's giant leaps in performance and outcome far beyond the norm, so not incremental. It's busting through past performance limitations or ceilings or edges or boundaries. It means reaching new heights, and fundamentally going places that we've never gone before. So we're stepping out of the comfort zone, but not incrementally. Something significant is what we're after in this idea and pursuit of breakthrough. Now, how do we know what's humanly possible? This is an interesting question. If we look back at history, things that we're doing today, we certainly weren't possible 20 years ago, maybe not even conceivable 20 years ago. Now, 20 years ago, what was happening then probably wasn't conceivable 30, 40 years before that, and just keep going back in history. So if you look at humanity, of how we've evolved, we keep pushing the envelope. Well, what's possible? How do we know that? Now, kind of a trite, fun example is, imagine trying to learn how to fly. So you tell your friends you're going to learn how to fly, and they look at you kind of crazy, because that's kind of crazy. You don't have wings, you don't have feathers, you don't have the anatomy for it, the mass isn't right. But let's say you're practicing every day and you tell them that, and the way you're practicing is you're jumping, right? You jump and you jump 18 inches high, let's say. And in that, there's not a lot of probability of your success. There's also not a lot of risk. But what if you're now on a platform and it's 3 feet or 10 feet? Or what if it's 20 or 50 or 100 feet? Now, the probability hasn't changed, right? You still got low probability, but the risk has gone up. And this is a dynamic right here that portrays what I think happens a lot in executives. Now, we challenge our executive clients all the time around this notion of what do you think is possible? Because what happens is we look back at the history and we do a trend analysis of where we're going, and then we have a certain reach and a stretch. Now, if you've done strategic planning with executives and been in the boardroom, you know this is a big conversation. And the conversation really comes down to what's possible or not. But what's happening is we're messing with what's probable and what's possible. So it's not very probable that I'm going to fly, whether I'm jumping off the ground or the 100-foot platform. And the risk goes up as I move from 50 feet to 100 feet. So what ends up happening is our fear, the risk analysis that we're doing maybe even consciously or unconsciously, has us then say to ourselves, that's not very probable, therefore let's not go for it. And so we collapse possibility with probability, and we quit striving for something that's anything more than an incremental improvement on our normal improvement line. We've got to break that pattern. And the way we break that pattern is we build capability. If we build capability, then there's more probability of reaching that possibility we're striving for. So imagine if somehow I could build the capability where I began to have my arms function like they had feathers and the right anatomy and wings, if you will. Now, all of a sudden, I'm willing to take the risk at 10 feet, 20 feet, maybe not all the way to 100, but as I build that capability, I'll jump off at 100. And that's the whole idea of breakthrough, is that we've got to build capability so that we can achieve the possibilities. Because the bottom line is, we don't know where our limits are. We make up the limits. And as soon as we make up the limit, we then guarantee, basically, we're not going to surpass that limit. Why? Because it's not possible. So that's the possibility thinking orientation I'd like you to be in today. Let's look at building capability. Because when we build capability, we don't have to play this insanity loop, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results. It's time for us to go beyond our mainstream thinking, beyond our mainstream approaches, and get and develop new advanced capabilities. Right? We need greater perspective. We need more knowledge about how transformation really works in humans and in systems. We need different leadership styles and behaviors. We need more robust skills around change and change leadership. We need more robust methods, right? So we're all kind of in this mental loop, if you will, of assuming the perspectives that we have in the mainstream, the knowledge that we carry, our behavior, skills, and methods are going to get us there. Well, where's the there we're trying to get? They'll get us incremental improvement, but they won't get us breakthrough. We need something else. So all those methods that we employ, all of us, things like project management, program management, change management, organization development, Lean, Six Sigma, on and on, those are all fantastic methods, and they're useful, and we deploy them ourselves at being first all the time, but they're partial. They're not sufficient to deliver breakthrough. So what I'm inviting you to do, if you're a lean person or a change management person or executive using certain tools and methods, is to park them for the next 45 minutes or so. And let's look at what other capabilities we need to develop. Because then we can raise the bar, right? We can reach further, we can go higher, we can achieve more. All right, so enter the idea of conscious change leadership. Conscious change leadership has been the focal point and being first for 4 decades. The whole purpose from the beginning has been, how do we unleash human potential in ourselves? How do we achieve results that are far beyond the norm? And this rest of our conversation today is exploring what we mean by conscious change leadership. All right, it all starts with the 3 words. First is conscious. So what do we mean by conscious? Conscious is all about us as individuals. It's us waking up to our interior, to what's happening behind our eyes, if you will. It's waking up to conscious awareness. It's waking up to getting more and more mindful about what's happening on the inside of us, and then transforming ourselves from the inside out as we discover things that maybe don't support our expression of our best self. It's all about reaching higher states of consciousness, being able to shift our state of consciousness to be more creative, more innovative, to get the aha on the inside in any moment. But it's also about, over time, developing ourselves to operate from higher stages of consciousness. A state and stage definition is very simple. A state change is something I can do in the moment. A stage development is something that happens over years. But as I raise my stage of consciousness or my level of consciousness, then I operate even under stress from higher states. And that's the idea of conscious. So fundamentally, if I can get into the zone or the flow state as an athlete would talk about it, and do that as a leader, then I'm going to be more effective. The change piece is all about roadmaps. It's all about strategy, process, practices, tools, so that I can consciously design and lead transformation at any level of scale, from self all the way to community and maybe even reaching out into the world. And the idea with roadmaps is that change is a process. So I've got to know what the process is for personal change, for creating breakthroughs in my relationships, whether it's with coworkers, my boss, my subordinates, my spouse, my kids. Same with what happens in team. How do we develop team? How do we develop the organization? How do we transform culture? Those are process roadmaps. And lastly is leadership. And leadership is all about moving beyond command and control. Command and control is very powerful. It's still used today in very important times, like under emergencies, when we don't need to be collaborative when the house is on fire. Let's let somebody who knows where the exit is to bark those orders and command us, and off we go. But for the most part, the complex VUCA world we live in requires a different kind of leadership. The heroic leadership of the past no longer suffices because no one of us has an answer to this VUCA reality. No one of us can solve the major challenges that we face. So we've got to operate co-creatively. Yes, we still have hierarchy. Hierarchy is very useful for effectiveness and efficiency, but we need to have a quality of equality where we're all in this together. So no matter where I am in the organization, I can still offer my good idea and have it be accepted on its merit. So there's a meritocracy underlay to co-creative leadership. And the idea of co-creating is that it in itself unleashes our human potential because we're listening to each other, we're engaging each other, we're with each other in a way that together we each have our ideas and they're a partial view of reality, but when we listen, all of a sudden we spin them up into a bigger perspective, and that's where the aha comes, and that's where the breakthrough comes from. So the change in leadership is also a fundamental part of conscious change leadership. Now, graphically, we can portray it like this: conscious change in leadership. So conscious is about who I am, who you are. Change is about how we transform. Leadership is about what we do. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through these pie slices. Some of them will dive in a little bit more. Some of them will just talk about in more of a cursory way, all for the sake of time. And I'll do my best to integrate these as we go. And also, I might pull into a little bit of the system of transformation and how we actually develop these capabilities and capacities in our organization and in our clients. All right, so conscious. The essence of conscious is all about being. It's all about how do I move from operating unconsciously and automatically out of my ego's conditioning to operate from a higher state or stage in myself where I'm operating from my being, from my higher self, from the part of me that is my best self. And we'll discuss that more as we go. The change piece is all about strategy and process. I would also like to add practices and tools. It's a small circle, so two words is better than four here. But what we're talking about here is the strategies and the processes, practices, and tools for leading change at any level of scale. And in leadership, it's all about co-creating. So the first place we want to start is in conscious. So let's dive into the first area of conscious. Conscious really has as its center the whole idea of self-mastery, right? Now, self-mastery, what is it? Well, for us, it's based on this fundamental understanding. And that is that we live in a world of facts, right? Right now, it's a certain temperature where you are. It's raining, sunny, or cloudy. You're sitting or you're standing. You're alone or you're with people. Those are the facts of your experience right now. Anytime you're awake, you're interpreting facts. You're making judgments and discernments. And you're doing that through your fundamental assumptions about reality. Now, those assumptions are often held unconsciously, right? They're formed by the cultures in which you grew up, by the family system in which you grew up, by your successes and failures throughout your childhood and your early adulthood. And we know from psychology that, most of us have formed, if not all of us, our fundamental assumptions about reality very young in life, by the time we're 5 or 6. The core of our personality and our behavior style and our emotional patterns and how we think are formed at a very young age. And that becomes the backdrop to the rest of our lives, and it's held unconsciously. Well, we perceive reality through that lens, and it's the lens that determines what we see. So we don't necessarily see the reality that is, we see the reality that we are. We bring our own interpretation to those facts, and then we believe those facts to be as we see them. In other words, we could say, what is truth? Is truth capital T an objective thing? Well, maybe it is, but as soon as you bring a human to look at the fact, all we really know is my truth and yours is yours, because we're all interpreting the facts differently. Now, most people do not have this understanding, so that they think the reality they see is the reality that is. Back to our idea of possibility. I look at the situation and I go, that's not possible. Or, ooh, there's a low probability factor there, really high risk. Well, maybe there's not. But if I'm in a state of fear, you can bet that the probability judgment goes down and the risk goes up. If I'm in a state of confidence, then I think, oh, hey, this is more probable and there's lower risk. Well, what's the fact? And the truth is we never know. All we ever know is our truth. Okay, with that being said, then, the fundamental assumptions in that interpretation perception fact loop determines our internal state at any moment. What we think about the situation, the sensations in our body, our emotions, our energy, all that falls out of the interface between our fundamental assumptions and the world. So if we interpret that we're in a situation that's good, then our thoughts are very confident based, and our sensations in our body are more joyous, and our emotions are more confident and happy, and our energy is, running. But if we judge it as a threat, or our competency is going to be in question, or we're not going to be included, or we don't have enough control of this situation, it's going to go south and we're going to fail, then our internal state is very different. And so the idea is the internal state then determines our behavior, fight, flight, or freeze, or something that's in congruence with what's called for, right? So we speak up when we need to, we be silent when we don't, we take control, we step back and we follow, but the behavior is congruent if we're actually in a flow state inside, right? And if we're in a fear state, then our behavior tends to be fight or flight or freeze. And that, of course, determines then the level of quality of our actions and our performance. That determines our results, and those become facts again. That's the self-mastery loop. Now, the idea of understanding this is we can ask then from a breakthrough standpoint, where's the leverage? And we can do practice improvement at actions and performance and get incremental improvement over time and raise our level of performance mastery. We can work with behavior modification. Those are all good techniques for changing behavior. But where the real leverage is when we shift our internal state and really address our fundamental assumptions about reality and do the transformation there. Because that's where the paradigm shift is that changes everything else downstream from that. In that, there's a fundamental understanding here that mindset is causative. So in the world of breakthrough, we're always addressing mindset. Not sometimes, always. Because it's our mindset that determines everything else. Now, having said that, then, what we're looking to do is to become consciously aware of what our mindset is. Because only by understanding through conscious awareness do we then have the capacity to change, right? That then leads us, to the idea of self-mastery skill development, right? Self-mastery always starts with self-awareness. That's mindfulness. That's becoming aware of our patterns. That's looking at what is my behavior pattern. When is it that I get controlling? When is it that I don't speak my truth? When is it that I get too in the space and force or manipulate my idea rather than listen to others? I've got to build that self-awareness of my style and my pattern. Now, in doing that, there's all kinds of practices, there's tools, there's a process I'll show you shortly to build self-awareness. That then leads us to another level of skill. And that next level of skill is all about self-management. And self-management is the ability to shift my state. So when I'm aware of myself being angry or nervous or afraid or doubtful or fearful, or any of the internal states that aren't going to produce the performance level I want, how do I manage myself, shift my state to come back to center, back into more of a flow state experience where my natural potential can come out rather than be limited by my fear? Now, again, there's a process for this. There's skills, there's tools, there's techniques. And that leads us, though, once we've built that skill set, to self-leadership. Self-leadership is the ability to then, with all this awareness I have and the management skills I have, to then go into my own unconscious and reprogram myself. So literally shift the software in the hardware of my brain. That's self-leadership. So rather than my history maybe of being in challenging conversations around strategic direction, and I get too pushy and I don't listen, because underneath it maybe is my fear of failing, and my idea is obviously the best idea, so I'm trying to push it through. And rather than just be able to be aware of that or just be able to shift my state, how do I actually go in and reprogram myself so I no longer operate that way? That's self-leadership. Self-mastery then is taking all those skills and now applying them with how do I actually live out of the flow state, a higher state of consciousness, and develop myself from a stage standpoint more thoroughly. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So self-mastery then is all about living out of my being rather than out of my ego's story. Now, having said all that, we want to learn these skills in progression, but we apply them universally. In other words, we're moving all the time through all these 4 buckets of skill development as we live from a self-mastery standpoint. All right, so that brings us back to our model. So self-mastery is the foundation of conscious. Now, what we're doing in self-mastery is we're transforming mindset and behavior. And again, I'll talk to you about a process for that shortly. We're developing more presence because as we shift our state and transform some of the fear-based mindsets and behavior, the unique higher self of ourselves comes through more. There's more transparency in us. There's more authenticity in us. There's more ability to remain in our center in the face of a VUCA environment or chaos, right? And out of that presence, we can build more connection, deeper relationship, etc. Now, the other piece of this is what we call the 4 sights. Now, the 4 sights are very interesting, and you may have heard of one of our advanced training programs called Foresight. It's 20 days long, 4 weeks over a period of about 5 months. I don't want to talk about the program here. I want to talk about the sights themselves. So if we look at these 4 sights, it's all about seeing. It's all about us looking through the lens of our own consciousness, through ways of seeing, so we can look at our VUCA complex reality and understand it better so we can navigate it more effectively to breakthrough. Now, the first is seeing systems, and the second is seeing process. Third is seeing the internal and external world and the relationship between the two. Internal meaning thoughts, behaviors, values, beliefs. Externals means the tangibles out here of what's going on in the external world. And seeing consciously is all about being awake to my interior. Now let's get a little deeper in it. So seeing systems is how parts and wholes interact with each other to impact each other, right? At all levels of scale, right? Self-relationship, all the way up through organization, community, world. Now there's a lot of pieces to this, and this is actually just a partial view of how we can talk about seeing systems. But it's the relationship between parts and wholes. It's all about being able to see the systems within systems, like your relationship with your coworker is one system. Well, each of you is a system itself. And oh, by the way, each of you participate in a family system. And then there's your nuclear family system and your friends out there. Oh, and then there's the team you're both a part of and the business unit you're part of. Those are systems within systems. And there's dynamic relationships between systems within systems, and lots of interdependencies and impacts across the boundaries of those systems. From a contextual standpoint, if I don't know the context of something, it's very hard to generate an outcome. So there's a relationship between larger context and outcomes we're trying to achieve. In other words, as an example, if I'm on a team and I've got a team outcome that I'm pursuing, it may be also that there are other teams in my business working similarly, but we're also trying to achieve some client-based outcome. And what are those contexts? Because they will influence how we work. If I don't see all that in the interdependencies, then I'm going to be ineffective and inefficient. So there's lots of ways to think about seeing systems. The bottom line is, if I'm after breakthrough, I can't be blindsided by the interdependencies across levels of systems or the inside-outside relationship. In other words, if I'm focused inside my organization, but outside there's dynamics in the marketplace or the larger national economy or global economy, or maybe new things that are happening in the social setting and the culture of my country. If I'm not aware of that and its influence on what I'm trying to do, I'm limited. So the idea of seeing systems is the more I can see the nuances, the more I can navigate complexity. From a process standpoint, seeing process is all about how actions and events unfold over time. and how they impact each other, how they impact results. Now, again, there's lots of ways to think about this. Here are a few. We're often, as leaders, focused on the present, but leaning into the future. But the truth is, what's happened in the past has been the runway to get us here, and it's the launching pad to get us there, where we're going. Without a view of that whole understanding, I'm often limited because I'll start marching in a direction and not understand the history of what's gone before to know how to leverage it. And instead, what I'll do is I'll be blocked by it. And I'm sure you can think of examples where you've kind of, marched along in a way that you thought would be successful, and then you're blindsided by something, and somebody, then reveals that there's a historic dynamic that just doesn't allow that in our organization anymore because of that historic dynamic. That's the idea of seeing process. So it's all about directionality, where we've come from, where we're going. It's the input-output relationship. So I'm trying to work on this now. What inputs it? What are the outputs that are going to be created? And of course, those inputs may come from all levels of systems and systems within systems. And so the outputs may be broadcast into various levels of systems, not just the system I'm working in. So you can see how these things interface. Sequence, steps, pace, who's doing it, and fundamentally the ability to navigate in a nonlinear way when it's essential. So when emerging dynamics occur, you're able to adapt to those and move forward. That's all seeing process. Seeing internal and external is about the mirroring between the inner dynamics of mindset at the individual level and culture at the organizational level or the collective level, and how those reflect external behavior and systems and vice versa. So in other words, the internal world and the external world are not separate, they're actually married, and they reflect each other most, if not all of the time. So a couple ways to kind of get into thinking about this is, my mindset always drives my behavior. My behavior is a reflection of my mindset. Now, where do you start if you want to change? And the answer is, well, both is better than one or the other. Mindset tends to be causative, but the point is, if I go about personal change where I'm addressing both, I'm better off. Same with culture and systems. We see this mistake all the time. Prospective clients will call us and say, hey, we hear you guys are really good at culture change. Can you help us change our culture? And then all of a sudden we start talking about the systems and the behaviors that occur in the organization, and they're scratching their head saying, I thought we were dealing with culture. And the point is that systems reflect culture and culture reflects systems. And the idea, if you want to change culture, you better change both. In fact, you better also be changing all four: mindset, behavior, culture, and systems, because they're all married. So there's a mirroring here, and there's a level of causation and resistance. In other words, if I say, let's change culture, and we go after culture, and we begin to move, some of the dials around culture, it might be performance management stuff or types of people we hire. Well, we're going to run into resistance because behaviors and systems currently are built for the old culture. And so there's this causation. Wherever we start, the other quadrants, if you will, of mindset, behavior, culture, and system, no matter where you start, the others are going to generate resistance to the change because they're locked into the historic reality, not the future. And so the idea of seeing internal and external is that there's mutual arising in these four quadrants of mindset, behavior, culture, and systems. And if we want to really transform for breakthrough, we've got to address all four. That leads us to seeing consciously. Seeing consciously is all about being aware of our mindset and action. So how do we operate from choice, our own essential being, rather than our egos? Our egos have an automatic and unconscious worldview all the time, and we've got to rise above that so that we can have choice. And so here are some of the ways that we can look at seeing consciously. We'll go into these just from a standpoint of time, but the bottom line is seeing consciously starts with self-awareness. So if you go back to our 4 areas of skill development for a conscious change leader, for self-awareness, self-management, self-leadership, self-mastery, what we're doing in the lens of seeing consciously is I'm constantly looking at how am I showing up? Because how I show up in the various situations with my kids, my family, my coworkers, my boss, that's revealing to me who I am on the inside. That journey is all about seeing consciously, and you can see directly how it's tied to self-mastery. All right, so that brings us then to our last piece of the conscious bubble, which is vertical development. This, for me, is where the juice is. This excites me probably more than anything. The idea of vertical development really centers around worldview. Now, I'm going to give you a flyby of vertical development. We could spend days on this. There's actually a webinar that you'll find in the resource section at Being First on vertical leadership development. I encourage you to take a look at that if this interests you. I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview here. There are many pieces of vertical development, but really, if you had to hone it down to one thing, I'll just call it worldview. Now, what is worldview? Worldview is the vantage point or the perspective from which one, you, me, and everybody else sees and interprets the world. It's our mindset. It's fundamentally our mindset. And worldviews are subjective. In other words, mine's mine and yours is yours. We don't pick our worldview. I don't decide this is how I'm going to see the world. My worldview is my worldview because of my stage of development, because of the beliefs I have, the assumptions. Now, when I say stage, now we're getting into vertical development, because we're going to find there are different stages of development, and different stages bring with them different worldviews. And I'll explain some of that shortly. Worldviews can change over time. As a person grows in their self-mastery process, developing the skills and the tools of self-awareness, self-management, self-leadership, self-mastery, their worldview will grow. And as their worldview grows, things change for them, right? This is the heart of vertical development. Now, there's two types of development that we can identify. There's horizontal development, which is we gain new knowledge, we gain new skills, methods, we maybe change our behavior, we get better at certain tasks, right? And all of this is happening within the current paradigm of understanding. And this is 99% of executive development. You know, whether it doesn't matter where you're going. This is the heart of executive development. We learn new stuff. Vertical development is different. Now, it's not saying that horizontal development is bad. It's just that if you want to achieve breakthrough, vertical development is the lever to pull. Vertical development is shifting the paradigm to a higher order, so that looking through the lens of the four sights, you're seeing more complexity because you've gone up a ladder and you've got a wider view. You've got a bigger horizon. You can see more of the systems within systems, more of the nuances, the interdependencies. You can see longer in time with process. That's the idea of vertical development. And so you come up with better solutions and generate breakthrough. Right? So we've got an advanced worldview developing in us. Advanced meaning it's more nuanced and more inclusive. It's a greater perspective. It provides us a deeper understanding. And fundamentally, it delivers the insights that we're after. And so with that, we can innovate. And it's through that innovation that we get breakthrough. This is the cutting edge of executive development. And this, for us at Being First, is the foundation of the leadership development that we do with senior executives, because this is how they see solutions to the complex challenges and the ability to navigate them through transformation to deliver breakthrough. Now, if you go back to our model here, you can see over on the right, horizontal development is all about this, right? Behaviors, actions, what we do. Vertical development is all about who we are from the inside. Again, it's not replacing what we do. It's not replacing new methods, new skills, new knowledge. Instead, it's adding to it, right? That's the essence of vertical development. All right, so an overview. There's about 7 to 8 billion people on the planet, and what we know from the researchers doing this research, again, we're action researchers, we're out in the world, we're not researchers in the, going offline into the lab, so to speak, here at Being First. What we know is there's about 10 stages of development in humanity across all cultures. Each person has a center of gravity of what our stage development is. Now, we also have a mixture of all the other stages in different proportions. This isn't as simple as just a stage. It gets actually very complex because humanity, we as people, are complex creatures. But this roadmap gives us tremendous insight to behavior and performance and outcome. No stage is inherently better or worse than the other. They just bring with them different capacities. They reflect different intelligences, different personalities, different abilities to deal with complex thinking, different levels of capacity to handle challenge and handle the nuances of big challenges, right? And there's a functional fit with the challenge as we develop ourselves. In other words, we bring the capacity that's needed in the situation. We have that ability as we develop our stage, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. Here's what happens as people develop vertically. There's a couple of different kind of avenues of growth. The first one is around seeing systems, right? So we increase our breadth of awareness across space. So again, we're climbing the steps, we're getting more and more of a perspective, then we lift off into a ladder. We've got a higher perspective and a higher perspective so we can see more of the systems within systems. We increase the breadth of awareness across time. So people at lower levels of development, they will focus on right now or this week or this quarter. And you ask them to do strategic planning 3 to 5 years, 10 years out, it makes them crazy because there's no certainty in that. And at their stage of development, they need more certainty. And that's just not their bailiwick. And that's not necessarily just a skill issue, it's a stage of development issue. Next is depth of awareness. So this is where I'm going deeper in my own self-awareness inside myself, which means I understand me and the psychological, emotional dynamics of me as a human, and therefore I also can bring those out to you. I can understand you more. So I see the internal and external reality, and in that, because I'm seeing that more, I'm more awake to the internal reality in me and you, so I see consciously. I see my mindset in action, I'm beginning to see your mindset in action, and out of that, I have more compassion for you, I have more trust in you, I have more relationship with you, etc. And then lastly, as people develop vertically, there's the ability to take on multiple perspectives. So in other words, I can move along this hierarchy of development and look through the various lenses, go down a stage, go up a stage, and use those lenses to help me get done what I need to get done to achieve the breakthroughs that I'm after. All right, here's the net of it. As we develop vertically, a bunch of really good stuff begins to occur for us naturally. Now this again is the short list, but the point of it is that vertical development isn't just a nice to do, it's not a touchy-feely. It is that, of course, but it's also delivering greater impact in the world through more accountability and more empowerment and building more trust and openness, and there's more love and justice and service. All that becomes more natural as somebody increases their stage of development. All right, so let's look at it. From a stage of development standpoint, first and foremost, as we start down here at the opportunist level, now there's about 4% of the population down here. If we start talking about politics, it gets very interesting here. The opportunist is all about power. Their core value, the worldview they look in is power, big stick, my way, pushy, manipulative, etc. Not many leaders are opportunists. Why? Because they just can't generally handle the complexity of the world because they look in a very myopic lens of what's best for them from a sense of narcissism, if you will. Then there's the diplomat. The next level of stage of development is really oriented around control and order and things in the right way and protocol. And this is how we do it here. Structure, linearity, predictability. Really great to have diplomats running nuclear power plants, right? Here is the way we do this, and we do this every day by the book. The next level up is what we call expert achiever. Now, the two ends of this have significantly different ways of being in the world. And again, this is a flyby, so I'm not going to give you a lot of detail here. But you can see there's about 62%. It might be 58, it might be 70. You know, these are aggregated numbers based on what a lot of researchers are telling us. But there's about 62%. So the majority of us live in this zone. Now that means our societies, our structures, our systems, our economic systems, how we do change, how we conceive possibility, how we do strategic planning, how we raise our kids, what our school systems are like, all of that is built out of this mindset. Now the next level of mindset, things begin to change. And we move from the conventional mindset to a post-conventional mindset, meaning people are now stepping outside of, well, I do it because this is the way my family did it, this is the way my dad did it, this is the way we do it, this is the way society do it, and they're beginning to think for themselves. They're individuating, if you will, from society and making their own choices. There tends to be more awareness, and again, there's more depth of awareness as you go up this scale. and the spiral. There's broader awareness around space, seeing systems. There's longer time horizons, etc. The individualist is individuating, and what they're seeing in themselves is I can be my own person, and there's a recognition of respect for others and being their own person. That's the pluralist side of this. So this is where people really begin to get turned on to environmentalism as an example. Let's take care of the planet, as opposed to the expert achiever might be still about greed, consumption, extraction of resources, and pollution, and not so concerned about long-term with the planet because their time horizons are less. The individual pluralist, on the other hand, is much more interested in diversity, equality across gender, across race, sexual orientation, etc., because they see themselves as unique and therefore others as well, and that respect says, ooh, I want to include. Then we move to the strategist. The strategist is all about being the best they can be, and it's at this stage that things begin to change. And the change is, in the strategist and alchemist, is what we call going from first tier to second tier. First tier is ego-driven needs. Second tier is being-based needs. This is right out of Maslow in your psychology class in college. A little more refined than Maslow did it, but Maslow was the developmental psychology. This is a developmental model. The strategist and the alchemist have greater ability to navigate complexity. They can hold the tension between polarities. They can deal with emergent reality. They can stay centered in themselves and deal with conflict better. They can stay centered in themselves in places of confusion where they haven't figured things out. As opposed to lower in the stages of development, people will immediately want to jump on a solution because that gives them comfort. The strategist and the alchemist have the ability to really dance with the emergent reality that VUCA really brings us as leaders. Right, so there's the essence of stage development. So the idea of being first is, in all of our leadership development, we're looking to support people to develop from wherever stage they're starting from, that stage development. All right, so the premise is, solutions to more complex challenges require leaders with higher levels of consciousness. The complexity broadens our worldview or demands a broader worldview. That gives us more information. We get more nuanced solutions. Our more inclusive worldview engages and empowers more types of people, like everyone, and therefore we include the best ideas. And fundamentally, from our standpoint, without vertical development, it's very hard to achieve breakthrough, because then you're just going to go back to that insane thing about doing the same thing you've always done, maybe shifting it a little bit, improving it incrementally, but all in the same paradigm. We got to bust out of the paradigm. All right, so that's our conversation about conscious. I'm going to buzz through the next two very quickly, only for the sake of time. All right, so the idea in the world of change is I need a process for change. And so we start at the level of self. And this is, for us, the underlying operating system for how individuals change. If I don't build conscious awareness, there's no way I can change my interior. I can't resist it. What I find inside myself, I can't fight it. I can't kill it. I'm not about killing my ego. I'm about working with my ego. How do I do that? Well, I turn towards it. I be with it. I feel it. And there's tools and techniques and practices for all of these steps. I then, with that acceptance, I'm able to release the energy, the fear, the doubt, anxiety, nervousness that's driving this ego story that I might be uncovering. Once I've released it, that drops me into a deeper level of center and presence in my own being and myself. From there, I can create better solutions. I embody those new ideas and bring them and integrate them to the work that we're doing, and we're off, in a higher level of performance. This process underlies all four of the areas of self-mastery development: self-awareness, management, leadership, and mastery. Relationship and team is all about communication. So being first, there's a strategy, there's a set of processes, there's a set of practices and tools about how to develop communication skills so that I can work through conflict, I can generate better ideas, I can stay present in difficult situations, I can tell my truth to power, I can listen more deeply, etc. In the same way, we bring very robust processes around culture and around organization transformation and around breakthrough in communities. The two most prominent of those strategies and processes fall into what we call the breakthrough process. Now, this process is extraordinary. I'm just going to show it to you, and I won't be able to talk much through it here, but it all starts with aligning leaders. Now, what you'll notice is once you got a leader's line, they got to define the vision. And maybe they have a vision, maybe it's recreating it from scratch, maybe they're tweaking it a little bit. But you notice right there, there's a distinction here. We don't define the vision, then align leaders to the vision. That's old paradigm expert achiever mentality. And what it does is it drives then the argument about can we achieve that vision or not. What we want to do is align leaders to the idea of achieving breakthrough in themselves, in their relationship, in their team, in the organization, and the communities they serve. If they align to breakthrough, then we know no matter what the vision is, they got the highest probability of achieving it. As opposed to define the vision, argue about whether it's probable or possible. So we always start with alignment to the idea of breakthrough, then we define the vision. We assess current reality always, because that gap between current reality and the vision has us identify the breakthroughs required. Now, breakthroughs for us are the breakthroughs of mindset, from leaders to the workforce, breakthroughs in behaviors, from leaders to the workforce, breakthrough in culture, and breakthrough in systems. What we mean by systems are strategy, structure, business processes, business systems, technology. So we identify all those breakthroughs that are required to achieve the vision based on what is occurring in current reality. That then has us develop a transformation strategy. Always as part of a transformational strategy, there are a number of initiatives. There may be restructuring, it may be new technology implementation, it may be a shift of business processes, et cetera. And so we stand up different initiatives, integrate those initiatives, and we teach those initiative teams an operating system methodology to make sure their initiative is successful. I'll show you that in just a second. Then we implement that with support. We do it in partnership. We don't lead those things. We are advisors to those project teams. We learn and course correct as we go because VUCA is never linear. We achieve the breakthroughs, each of those teams, and we stay with them, supporting them until they all have adoption and sustainment of their specific business results, and that delivers the vision. For each of those project teams, we teach them the change leaders roadmap methodology, meaning that whether it's a restructuring or technology implementation or whatever, that they're using this 9-phase model. Now, there's 77 tasks in this 9-phase model. It's always customized. They do as few as those tasks as they possibly can because every task consumes resources. So this is a nonlinear model. It speaks to all levels of development. So the diplomats love it because there's tons of structure. The expert achievers love it because it's all about course correction and navigating complexity. The pluralist individualists love it because it's all about people and engagement and communication. And the second tier strategists and alchemists love it because it's so integrated and deals with polarities. So there's a couple thousand pages of resources, assessments, checklists, info sheets, et cetera, that goes with this methodology. Of course, I'm not getting into any of that today. But what I want to share with you is the whole idea here is for change is we need strategies, we need processes, especially processes, and then tools and practices. And the reason processes are so important is because all change at every level scale is process driven. All right, that leads us then to leadership. And the idea with leadership is we're moving beyond command and control. Now there's many parts of leadership. There's tons of management and leadership books. I'm not going to make the distinction between the two. But the point I want to talk about here is I want to point out to you 5 things that co-creative second-tier leaders do that are different than expert achiever leaders. And these are the leverages for breakthrough. The first is modeling. You can't talk about the new way and not walk it. You know, it's why we call our fundamental executive level breakthrough course, Leadership Breakthrough, Walk the Talk of Change, because it's all about modeling. It's all about coaching. You know, it's not me, and I don't mean coaching in the expert achiever tell, I'm the boss, I know the way type of coaching, but coaching that's learner delivered, learner based. In other words, from a second tier perspective, I respect the fact that people have the skills they have. I'm asking them what they're aspiring to. I'm asking them to engage in the self-awareness to identify what they need. And then finally, I'm offering advice. So there's a whole different way of coaching from a second tier perspective. The other part of co-creative leadership is I've got a developmental orientation. I'm always trying to develop my people. I'm always trying to develop processes. I'm always trying to develop everything about my organization. So with this idea of model, coach, and develop, for us, there's a core set of capabilities that we teach leaders, and it's based on this model. First is, we say to leaders, if you're not communicating your breakthrough journey, meaning what you're aspiring to, what the breakthroughs are that you're after and how you're going to get there, and what the roles are, what the responsibilities are, what you expect of your team, if you're not doing that on an ongoing basis, then it's a flash in the pan. People get excited about the vision and then they go back to work. So in other words, their work should be a part of the breakthrough journey. That's a leader's responsibility. Only the leaders can keep reinforcing that. Then they got to model it. And they got to model the desired way of being, the desired way of working, desired way of relating. Fundamentally, that means being authentic. It means being honest and self-aware when you can't manage, when you don't manage yourself back into your center, when you're pushy, when you're angry, when you're frustrated. It's being open and honest about that and revealing your interior, having the courage and the authenticity to do that. Because it's that modeling that enables other people to then step into that way of being as well. Without the modeling, they don't do it. The next is coaching. And coaching is all about the new mindsets, of course, new behaviors, but also about the processes. Because if we're not up-leveling what we do and how we do it, breakthrough is not going to occur. It's not just a touchy-feeling mindset behavior stuff. It's got to be about what we do. Then finally, it's reinforcing. Reinforcing can be celebrating, rewarding success. It might be redirecting, and redirecting might be redirecting right out the door of the organization because that person, after a lot of coaching, isn't really getting it. And the idea then is this is an ongoing spiral. It's an ongoing piece of work of what co-creator leaders do. All right, that then leads us to adaptation. And again, in a VUCA world, it's always nonlinear, but because 62% of our staff is more linear, especially the 30+% that are experts or diplomats, we've got to begin to really teach them about nonlinearity and about adapting to emerging dynamics. So maybe we create a plan, it's linear, we project management, on time, on budget is our mantra, but new things arise and so we have to adapt to that. Well, for some people that makes them crazy. And for us as leaders, we got to embrace that and honor that and work with that and teach those skills. And then lastly, and certainly not leastly, is ensuring diversity. This means diversity of people. It means building respect and honoring different races and different genders and sexual orientation and age and weight and every way that we can think of. Humans need and deserve respect. There's a quality of equality in all of us. We're all human. And that also includes our ideas. And so a co-creative leader is really after generating diversity because it's through diversity that we get the best, and that's what we want when we're after breakthrough. Now, you may have heard in the market more and more conversation about conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is the interface between what we're talking about and about leadership. You may also hear the phrase conscious change. Well, that's the interface between conscious and our whole world of change. And of course, there's lots of conversation to get beyond change management into change leadership. And that's the interface between change and leadership. For us, though, our belief is everything here is what's needed, and everything here is what delivers breakthrough. So that's what we get, is that when we build this capability, we can interface with our VUCA world in a different way because we're rising higher in our states and stages of consciousness. We see more of the nuances of complexity. We are empowering ourselves and people to step out of our comfort zones. We're bringing more capability around what we see from perspective, how we be in terms of how we relate with each other, how we work with each other. We're bringing higher order methods and skills, and we get to lift off at all levels of scale. And that's the essence of how conscious change leadership can ensure achieving breakthroughs at all levels of scale. If this is of interest to you, there's some core programs at Being First. I'm not going to go into a big marketing spiel here, but just so that you know by name, if you're on our website, Foresight is all about a deep dive into conscious change leadership. It's 20 days over 5 months, 4 different one-week sessions. Leadership Breakthrough is a 4-day off-site residential leadership mind-blowing training that often changes people's lives and the quality of work at the top of the house of the executive team and then throughout the organization as it gets deployed. The self-mastery curriculum is really all about those 4 levels of building those skills. And then one thing that's not on the screen is the course that we call Change Leaders Roadmap Navigator School. So if you're interested in the Change Leaders Roadmap and you're on a project team or deploying project teams, doing restructuring or technology implementations, that might be of value as well. If any of this triggers for you questions that you don't get answered today, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to our organization through the resource page on our website. There's tons of resources that we share. And if you want to reach out to me personally, there's my personal email. Well, thank you very much. When I started this, my lovely partner, Linda, said, don't talk too fast. And I said, I'm going to have to because I only got an hour for about, an hour and a half conversation. So we're 3 minutes over, Diana, but I think we have some time for some questions. Thank you all. I really appreciate your time and your interest in this whole field of conscious change leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dean. That was great. We do have some questions for you. This first, I think what they're looking for here is, can you say in a summarized way how what they're calling creative leadership, but this co-creative leadership is a way to manage complex situations? And I guess more of like, how is that alchemist strategic level? If you can just summarize that again for us, please.
How co-creative leadership, or maybe a second tier perspective on leadership, enables navigating complex situations?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the bottom line is, since mindset is causative, I only see from any stage or state of development, I only see what I see. And then there's the interpretation factor, is I see what I see and now I'm interpreting it. And I'm interpreting it always through the state of consciousness I'm in. And that generally, is driven by the stage of consciousness I'm in, unless I do some state changing thing, breathing or something. And so right there, I only have so many levers I can pull. Now, the higher my stage or state at the moment, the more levers I have. And so fundamentally, once somebody reaches a second tier level of development in themselves, now granted, there's less than 10% of humanity that live there, there's the ability to manage what I'll call polarities. And what I mean by polarities is where there's tension between directions. I remember one client that we worked with for a number of years. It was a utility, and they committed in their vision to be both green, right, environmentally sound, and low cost. Well, there's nobody else in the country, the US at least, that has taken that on, because from an expert achiever way of thinking, those are trade-offs. You're one or the other. From a second tier perspective, you then begin to say, why can't we do both? And as soon as you declare that as your vision, now, of course, what you got to do is how. And so with that vision as a declaration, the how has to come out of collaboration. It has to come out of working together, because none of us know the answer to this. So now all of a sudden, our behaviors change and how we relate across boundaries, how we relate in terms of communicating and sharing resources and listening to each other's ideas. So our culture begins to change. And if we're looking through the lens of both of those things, green and low cost, I've got to up-level how we do stuff, right? Our systems, how we engage clients, how we engage regulators, how we engage everybody. So the processes we use, the technology we use also have to be up-leveled. So what I'm sharing then is there's a backdrop to this question. I could drop into an answer that's operational, but that's not very valuable without really understanding the bigger picture of how stage development raises the game in all these quadrants of mindset, behavior, culture, and systems, and enables us to begin to see things differently. Because without that, the operational stuff, it's like me then talking about, Diana, part of our systems, like, oh, you could use the CLR methodology this way, you could use this process that way, these tools would be very useful. It's like with Michelangelo, he was using the same paintbrushes everybody else was using, or the same chisels and hammers, but he made masterpieces. Now, why? Same tools. Well, it's because who he was and how he saw. And then he built the skills to model that. So I want to stay at a strategic level in that answer rather than do what I don't think is of service to talk operationally. And I hope whoever asked it is okay with that. Or you can send me an email. Diane, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your next question?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't know that you were done. This is Dr. Gabor Mate shares that chronic stress, or VUCA, will seriously negatively affect our culture's mental health, especially that of our children. How do we change the entire culture of the U.S. to be less stressed? And I think a little more specifically, maybe how does this contribute to a less stressful environment, between self and relationships and teams?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I love that question. A couple pieces to that I'd like to share. So for me, I first got into this work in graduate school. And in graduate school, I did a degree at Stanford, and it was in education, and my orientation was bringing holistic education to the public school system in California. That's what started me on this path. And what I saw was with kids, they're so much faster at adopting some of the practices around mindfulness and stress management and breath control and visualization than adults ever are. So that's just one thing. Hard stop on that idea. Okay, next idea. One perspective is I got to change the culture in the US. And I get that perspective. And I honor that perspective. But let me share a different perspective. From a second tier perspective, I would reframe that a touch. Because here's how evolution occurs. There's a relationship between our inner world and our outer world. And we evolve on the inside as we interface with greater and greater challenges on the outside. Now, what you've seen in the last, let's just say 5 years, at least in the US, is that the VUCA world, from an expert achiever, mainstream, conventional societal perspective, has given rise to the opioid epidemic. Now, it's been supported by the pharmaceuticals. It's been supported by way too many doctors. It's been supported by the idea from an ego perspective is we don't embrace pain, we run from pain. So from that expert achiever perspective, which is the conventional world, there's no way we can change the culture. Now, who's going to change the culture? Well, it's going to be maybe the individualist pluralist, but more likely the strategist alchemist, because they have more perspective. But the perspective that I want to share is, let's change the culture simultaneously as we honor VUCA is only going to increase. But our relationship to VUCA could be different. And the relationship to VUCA requires us to then look into our own interior, self-awareness, self-management, etc., to identify how we're getting plugged into the stress that VUCA is generating. Now, part of that stress is buying into for example, all the downsizing that's happened in our organizations and do more with less. Where there's a place where millennials are saying, I ain't doing that. I'm not working for those companies. I'm going to go do something else. And so those right there are culture-changing moves, if you will, because we need people in those organizations. If they're going someplace else, maybe our organizations begin to change. But there's a simultaneous reality is that the humanity, the people, let's say, the population needs to grow a deeper awareness and ability, self-awareness, self-management, to come to their own center in the face of VUCA. And out of that, they will make more intelligent, wise, healthy choices about where they work and when they say no. And when they stop engaging and having to buy more, keep up with the Joneses, get ahead in their careers, and instead maybe focus more holistically on career and family, etc. So for me, this is a beautiful question and a very complex inquiry.
Great, thank you. And by the way, the person that asked that last question did say it was great information. So thank you for that, Dean.
You're welcome.
You know, this actually is a great question, I think, to follow up now after your last answer. What's the best way to develop my ability to perceive complexity through the 4 sights?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, you know, you've gone through 4 sights, so you know our way of doing that. Let me just say in a nutshell is, you know, there's a pause we can all make multiple times during the day in the automatic unconscious stimulus response thing that our body mind does, you know, generated by kind of our ego perspectives. What I mean by that is something happens out there, I automatically respond. I don't need to think about it, I just respond. And I likely don't have any conscious awareness of it unless I really live in an alchemist perspective. That's really where you begin to see your ego in action all the time. So if I'm not aware of my ego's response, I'm just playing out my response. Well, how do I, since the 4 sights are all about consciousness, they're about the lens through which I'm looking. I can't develop that skill consciously until I begin to pause. So creating practices that have me pause when I need to look through the 4 sights is the first thing. So, you know, Diana, for us, there are ways that we help people generate the ways in which they're going to make those pauses. How do they use their breath and their body awareness to center so they can then pull those lenses in front of their eyes, if you will. And that's the key. So it may be that a person starts off and says, you know, anytime I'm confused, I'm going to look through the 4 sights. Well, how do I wake up when I'm confused and actually look through the 4 sights rather than just unconsciously do my normal rote thing? Well, our way, as you know, because it's so somatic and body-based, is we'd say, well, let's first discover where confusion lives in your body. Does your jaw get tight? Does your stomach contract? Does your shoulders go towards your ears? You know, what are the signals in your body? And as you know, there are signals in your body. You may not be aware of them, but discovering them is not that hard to do with some tools and practice. So now all of a sudden, when I'm confused, I'm awake, I'm confused. And then I can take a breath, center myself, and say, okay, let me look through the lens of, and pick one, let's say seeing process, or seeing systems, or internal, external. Let me look through this lens, and now look through this lens at my challenge and see what gets generated as a solution through this lens. That's a starting point for me, is stopping, pulling the lenses off the shelf, applying them.
Awesome, thank you. You know, if it's okay, I'd like to ask one last question. We have a couple here I think are really important.
Okay.
This first is, what type of changes do you see in the leadership styles in different organizations over, say, the last 50 years? And how have you seen senior executives who go through vertical leadership development, how have you seen the impact when they engage in it?
Wow, that's a big question. Well, the first thing that comes to mind over the last 50 years is I started 40 years ago, and to get in the boardroom, you had to wear leather shoes, a tie, and a 3-piece suit. So that tells you a lot about where convention was, right? We had to look the part. And so in looking the part, I'll also say that back then, 40 years ago, you couldn't really use the word transformation because it's too airy-fairy. It's too fuzzy. You had to use other words around change. And so the point about that is there's been an absolute loosening. Now, I'll say 40 years ago, I think most executives were at what I'll call the cusp between expert and achiever. Now, as you know, Diana, experts are more oriented to looking down and in within their own silo, getting the answer right, doing it the way they do it. What's important to them are people in their trade, like accountants hang with accountants, lawyers hang with lawyers, engineers hang with engineers. They don't necessarily respect each other at that level because, hey, you're not an accountant, you're an engineer, what do you know? But when you get to the achiever side of that stage, you're more interested in the result. And so you realize you need those worldviews of the accountant, the lawyer, the engineer, and whatever on your team. And so there's more of a collaboration, if you will, et cetera. So that's one of the things I've seen is that there's a greater respect for what it takes to achieve results. There's more appreciation of system dynamics. There's more conversation about engagement. I mean, look what's happened to the change management field. You know, as partial, well, I'll say it this way first. As good as that is, but as partial as it is, as helpful as it is, but as partial as it is, it's really taken off in the last 10 or 15 years because of the mindset of executives in realizing that if they didn't have the people along in their big implementations of technology, et cetera, that they didn't get adoption and sustainment. But where they haven't yet gone is the larger reach of how to do that, engage people early, and all the stuff that we talk about in, you know, the world of conscious change leadership. But the point is that there's been more and more of an inclusive mindset, more embrace of people, more two-way communication, not one way, more listening, and a quicker willingness to course correct and get feedback. Now, all of that is the move of leadership, I believe, from this expert achiever cusp to what we call exit achiever, into the individualist pluralist. Now, it's very interesting because I've met a leadership team that really is residing in the individualist pluralist lately, and it was so evident, the underbelly, if you will, of that stage where everything had to be a certain way for them to feel like they were in the zone, right? Everything had to be inclusive. Didn't matter whether they were on track to an agenda or not, you know, because they'd kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater of all that on track to an agenda, which is the achiever level. You know, now they want to, get rid of that. It's all freedom and let things emerge. And as long as you're speaking your truth, that's okay. And then we'll spend days and days in the same conversation to get no traction. So, but that's the direction we're going. And so that's a watch out, I guess I'm saying. Now, what I've seen in our work is because we call out those watch outs, is that there's a quicker course correction that's available as people move from achiever level into the pluralist individual level. And we invite them to bring the structure and the mechanics that work from the achiever level with them into the pluralist individual world. So they become more inclusive, they become more collaborative, they orient to diversity more, they're more nonlinear, but they also have structure and they also have process. And what emerges out of that is more effectiveness, more efficiency, but a lot more trust, a lot more innovation, a lot more listening, shared kind of solution making. I mean, it's profound. Anyway, there you go.
And a lot less death by meeting.
Yeah, a lot less death by meeting, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I know we've all experienced that at some time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you so much. I want to thank everyone for sticking in with us to the very end. We will post a recording of this webinar and a copy of Dean's presentation on our center page, and you can find that at breakthrough.beingfirst.com. So thank you, everyone. And next month, September 12th is our next webinar. And that'll be with Dean. And it's going to be how your behavior as CEO directly affects the success of culture change. So we'll be looking forward to that. And you can also find that at breakthrough.beingfirst.com if you'd like to register. So thank you, Dean. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, Diana. Have a good day, everybody.
We'll see you all next time.